Now we're going to bring in MSNBC political analyst Alexi McCammon, host of the podcast In Sync with Alexi, along with Cristina Simpson Ramirez, president of Next Gen America. Did you ladies, as I welcome you, hear what Donald Trump was just saying there? I mean, what do you make of that? Is it possible people are going to get as sick as I'm sure I am and the two of you are of hearing his grievances just blather on and on? What do you think, Alexi?
For having me, Alex. I mean, I was just shaking my head. That was the first time I had heard him talking like that. And it's incredibly surprising that in the final days of an election where Roe is on the ballot, reproductive rights are on the ballot, rather, he is attacking and degrading and demeaning women and reminding women of all the ways that he talks about us and feels about us and will go out of his way to attack and belittle us. And I just think that that's a curious strategy if you want women to vote for you.
What do you think, Cristina? I mean, again, I was just shaking my head going, really?
I mean, it's totally absurd. He doesn't even talk about the real core issues that his own base cares about. He's making up things that she hasn't said or done or supported. She's not a pro-war candidate by any means. And yet he is saying these things. He doesn't talk about, again, the core issues that his own base wants, because he also doesn't want to talk about, at the end of the day, he said himself that he has concepts of a plan when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, that he's going to support abortion, even though he hasn't. He has no real plans to address the needs of the American people. He wants this position to address his own personal grievances.
All right, let's move past him now and get to Harris's rally with Michelle Obama tonight, Alexi. It's coming right on the heels of her event with Beyonce yesterday and former President Obama on Thursday. Do you think these high-energy, star-powered rallies can help recapture that wave of enthusiasm that we saw when Harris first became the nominee? Do you think there's enough time to do that?
Yeah, I think certainly doing it this close to the election is smart, as you said, to sort of revive that energy that her campaign had in the very beginning. It's also elevating celebrities with real star power, not the sort of random celebrities or rappers or people that Trump is surrounding himself with and trying to get endorsements from. These are folks on the Democratic side who have a base of their own, who have high favorables with men and women, and it's elevating Black women at a time when, of course, we have a Black woman running to be president. But as she often talks about, Black women are uniquely affected by many of these draconian abortion bans around the country.
What about the young voters nationwide, Cristina? Does a rally like this, does it energize them? Because reminder, we saw Biden with a record turnout of young voters in 2020. So the question is, can and do you expect Harris to repeat that?
Yeah, I think Harris is, I can tell you from being on the ground in North Carolina and Arizona and Pennsylvania and Michigan with Next Gen organizers across the country talking to young voters, how excited they are about this election, especially young women that have always turned out in higher numbers than their male counterparts and are decidedly in favor and excited about the Harris campaign. And I'm also excited to see the Harris campaign now doing more events focused on young people. Young people are just so critical to the win that we need the Harris Walls campaign to have. And so putting the time and investment into young people across the country, we know will have a real return.
So, Alexi, Harris campaigned in Texas. Trump is holding a rally in New York tomorrow. What do you make of them spending time in these non-battleground states likely to go to their opponents, being so close to Election Day? Is it about Congress or is it about something else?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's a way to help those down ballot candidates, whether they're running for Congress or, you know, something else, and important governor's races across the country, too. But I think that's what they're going for. They're also going for fundraising in different ways. It can help boost that in a way to make a pitch about where they're going. But certainly they're not going there thinking that they're going to turn those states, you know, to their opposite side, or to their side, rather. But I do think it's about helping those high-profile Senate races like Colin Allred in Texas, who's, of course, going up against the incumbent Republican Senator Ted Cruz. New York has a lot of crucial House races that Democrats will need to secure if they want control of that chamber, which, of course, as you both know, is incredibly important for certifying the election if it's contested in the same way it was last time. So I think it's all about those down ballot races right now.
Yeah, I think there are 7 races that are being very closely watched here in New York. So, Cristina, a new poll commissioned by Voto Latino shows Harris leads Trump among Hispanic voters in all battleground states. There's been concern about Trump peeling away some Hispanic support, but are you feeling optimistic about Harris's chances with this group now? And does it say anything about her odds overall?
Look, I think there's a portion of the Latino electorate that has been up for grabs and is increasingly up for grabs. So I'm glad to see the Harris campaign this week come out with their plan for Latino men, talking about how they're going to create millions of good jobs, make sure that there's affordable housing for the Latino community. Latino voters, especially in Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, people may not be aware, too, that they are critical for Democrats to win. And so we're seeing lots of phone banking. I'm glad I'm going to be doing a Spanish language phone banking this week, calling into Michigan and Pennsylvania to Latino voters as well. So the time and effort is really critical. Latino voters cannot be taken for granted by either political party. And so I'm glad to see the Harris-Walz campaign fully investing in our
And I'm sure they're very glad to have your support there. But Alexi, Harris putting the issue of reproductive rights front and center today, meeting with the doctors in Michigan that we just saw. NBC polling suggests it is one of the, if not the, top issue motivating voters. Here's a part of a new Harris ad.
I'm the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion?
There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
Women will be happy, healthy, confident, and free.
Will this drive voters to the polls, and will Democrats over-deliver expectations like they did in 2022? Or with Trump on the ballot, can you just not compare these elections?
No, I mean, we've seen that abortion is an incredibly visceral and real issue for a lot of people. We've seen how Harris is now making her pitch explicitly to men and having more male messengers step up and talk about situations they've had with their wives or partners or people in their lives. Because, again, this is not just a so-called women's issue. It is an issue that affects everyone. It is an economic issue. It is a family issue. And when these ads come up, which they've been consistent since Roe was overturned, they remind people of the human faces and the human lives attached to these policies, which can otherwise be abstract or become some partisan arguing game. But that's what these ads are doing. And I think it would be incredibly difficult to say you don't know where either candidate stands, or to say that you think Trump would be better on this issue after seeing ads like that, especially this close to the election.
Yeah.